How are you?
Hey, John, how's it going?
Good, good.
Yeah,
I know you live in the Northwest. You're up in Seattle. I'm in Portland, and we're having the weather that we live here for.
that's exactly right. Every day I call my mom in Virginia to check on her, and I say the same thing every day. It's been the warmest, most beautiful day we've had yet, because
Yep,
every day
yep,
it's getting a little warmer and a little clearer. So,
yeah. The weather's been awesome. Before we get started, why don't you just tell a little bit about yourself? I don't know if everybody makes the connection. This is Donna Winship, and your husband is Jamie, who we did an interview with. But maybe a little bit about you and your story.
yeah, so Jamie and I have been married for 36 years. We have three sons who are all adults now and married. We have five grandchildren and one due in August. So that's quite exciting for us. They live
Wow.
in Alaska, New York, and Washington, D.C. So we're
Where
really
where in
ice
Alaska?
in the Anchorage area, Eagle
Okay.
River.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're very, we're a long distance from them anyway, but now it feels really distant since we can't travel. But Jamie and I have a long history of living and working overseas after Jamie had a decorated career in law enforcement and me in education. And in 1990, after we'd been married about 5 or 6 years, I guess that would have been 7 or 8 years, we moved our family to Southeast Asia, where we lived for 10 years. And then we lived in Iraq during the war. And then we moved over to Jordan and then Jerusalem. And the door closed for us living overseas in 2016. And we relocated to the Pacific Northwest and started a training and consulting company called Identity Exchange, helping people deal with inner conflict in their lives so that they could understand their true identity and really learn to live, we say, live fearlessly in your true identity.
Hmm.
So we live in Seattle now. We've been here for 3 years.
That's great.
That's the short version.
No, that's awesome. Quick question. Why the Northwest? Because you guys are both from back east, right?
Yeah, we are from Virginia. Jamie's from Washington, D.C. We lived in Northern Virginia when we were married, when we were first married before we lived overseas. And we had some great connections up here in the Portland area, especially. And when we left Jerusalem, we really felt a little bit lost. We weren't sure. That was kind of sudden, and we weren't sure what next steps were, and we didn't feel led to live any other place overseas. And honestly, we felt like the Lord was impressing upon us that the identities we need to go to the next level were connections that we had actually in the Portland
Hmm.
area, and a lot of opportunities opened up for us up there. And so we just, took the risk, really. This life in the kingdom is all about taking risks. It's not rocket science. And yeah, there were people there that could really help us launch our little company, which we didn't know actually we were going to do. But we had been training and consulting for years and very high conflict zones with other nonprofits and expat workers in these different countries, and then with the nationals themselves, helping people to recognize that outer conflict is often present because of an inner conflict that you have that's really based in fear. And then you build up coping mechanisms to deal with that fear. And that's what we would call a false self or an imposter self or a shadow self. It's not bad, but it's based in coping mechanisms. And we had just seen a lot of great transformation, great success, and in a broad way in these different countries. And so, yeah, just we felt like the Lord was saying the identities that you need to help you get to the next level. We had been pouring out so much in training that we needed a time of receiving and encouragement. And yeah.
Well, we're glad you're here.
Yeah, thank you.
So I wanted to ask you, and I've been asking this of a lot of people, during this time of, for most people, unlike you guys who have been in lockdowns before, in a foreign country, in a foreign culture, etc. Um, but for most people, they haven't. They've never experienced. This is unprecedented for them. At the at least it's unique for sure. Um, but just what are the things that have been on your heart and mind, having uh, previous experience with similar situations, not the same, um, but there are some similarities. But just what are the things you've been thinking about, things that you found hope in and encouragement or learning, changing, transforming? Just what's on your heart and mind?
Yeah, initially when this all started, like everybody, it was terrifying. I would wake up in the morning and think it's a normal day, and then suddenly reality sets in. You're in that phase kind of between awake and asleep, and you start thinking. And usually I wake up, I'm a morning person, so I'm excited to get up and get started with my day. And then it's like, oh yeah, we're in this COVID season, and it just felt like a dream.
Mm,
And it was hard to know what to think. um, but now that we've been in it for about a month, for me, the things that have been really helpful to me, I think that's what you're asking and how I'm engaging, is I stopped watching the news. Initially, I was addicted to the news,
mm,
and it was just fear, 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 fear. And yeah, it was really unhealthy for me. And same thing, initially, I was on social media a lot because you have a lot of time. You want to see what other people are doing. And I had to really cut back on that because then, just different people are saying so many different things. And I was getting news from social media, and some of it was helpful and some of it was not. And as the days progressed, I really got back to kind of the basics on really focusing on being present, not being afraid to explore painful emotions that this brought up, all the what ifs, to not let myself go to the what ifs, but to really think, okay, how does this make me feel? We don't know an ending to this. We don't know if they're going to get a vaccine. We don't know if we're going to have an income. And like everybody, I mean, our income is traveling and speaking, and it's a halt. So we don't, and we're a small company, so we don't know in a month, what are we, how is that going to be? And really be present, stop instead of thinking in the what ifs, to really be present with today and not let myself go there, and really commune with God, be in that center, beautiful place of the Trinity, of that flow of giving and receiving. And I give away my burdens, and then I receive in exchange, what they want me to carry. What does God want me to know? I always say the prayer that changed my life, I learned it in the 90s in Indonesia with some great people who mentored us in learning to hear the voice of God. And it's just, God, what do you want me to know? This is how I'm feeling. Tell God the truth. We have to be honest. I feel nervous. I feel like and really the truth, not just, this is a horrible situation and I'm afraid, but what am I really afraid of? What I'm afraid I'm going to get it. I'm afraid I'm going to be sick and the hospital's going to be full. What am I'm afraid my 90-year-old dad is going to get it, and this is how his life's going to end. And that makes me feel out of control, powerless, helpless. And then not be afraid to sit in that emotion, in the presence of God, in the love of God, and just absorb what it is that he wants me to know. I call it the great exchange. On the cross was the great exchange. Jesus swallowed up death and replaced it with life. And just, we're so afraid of the death in our life. But if we don't sit with it, how can we engage in that exchange if we're not honest? So during this time, it's really helped me to get back to basics. I'm not in the rush of the schedule and We literally travel almost every weekend and then sometimes during the week as well. And so to not be in that cycle of packing and unpacking and getting ready for the next event, to really take time, especially early in the morning, to go through that process. And, you know, I always say, remind yourself who God is and who you are and your identity. What did he create you to be? Take that time to be and just receive. And so that's what I've been kind of practicing, that especially in the morning at the start of the day. And when I do have, it's a luxury to have this time to do that. And somehow, you know, remembering that God is crazy about us and that he never leaves us alone. He promises, you know, my favorite verse about identity and being with God is Isaiah 43:1 and the couple of verses following, that he changes Jacob's name in that verse to Israel. There's the name change. He gives him a new name because it says, do not fear. Jacob, I have formed you. Israel, I call you. Do not fear. I have redeemed you and called you by name. So you will know that you are mine. When you go through the flood, it won't consume you because I will be with you. And it goes on like that. And so just remembering those basic things. God, what's your identity for me? And this is how we're not afraid, because we know we're his unique and loved creation and that he's redeemed us with an identity. So yeah, those are some of the things that's kind of helping me. And then processing that with other, you know, a lot of other people. I guess I've really also, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just saying, I've really appreciated, we've moved from in-person meetings to this Zoom culture, and suddenly there's more access to family and friends. You know, we would FaceTime once in a while with our kids, but now we're like intentional. And I'm Jewish, was raised very Jewish, have a very Jewish family, and you know, taught all the Jewish practices to our kids, really wanted them to have a strong sense of their Jewish heritage. And so like we did an online Seder with them. Well, if it wasn't for this time period, I mean, they live in Alaska, Washington, and New York. We're in Seattle. We probably wouldn't have done anything. We probably wouldn't have seen them. But this like pushed us like to want to be together. And then we had this big joke at the end of the Passover Seder. You always close with saying next year in Jerusalem. And it was just fun. We were just like, next year together. Like, we don't care where, let's just be together. So, yeah, I'm kind of rambling now.
No, that's okay. It's great. Crisis does that.
Yeah.
Or maybe not necessarily crisis, but pressure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the pressure obviously intensifies or lessens at different times in our lives. But now I was going to make a comment. One's just more funny. My big Christmas gift was a new carry-on bag, because mine was like totally shattered and just the handle was broken. I had to like lean way over as I would drag it through the airport. I had to tie a rope on it and pull it because it was just beat to shreds. So I got this new carry-on and I haven't had to use it. So it's great. It's like there is this new, look at that brand new carry-on suitcase right there. I should have probably waited a year. No, I'm kidding. But I think the question I want to ask you, and this is a hard one, but I think we need to go there. This is a great time for us to do the things you were talking about. But, you know, look where I'm sitting. I'm sitting in an office and you're sitting in your kitchen, and we have electricity and we have food and we're safe and we're not worried about where our next meal's coming from. We're not worried about if I stand in line, by the time I get to the store, will there be any food left? I'm not worried about, you know, so there is this sense where for us, this is, and again, I'm not trying to minimize that it's difficult, but there's a sense where we certainly have it easier than a lot of people on this planet that are seeing far more severe consequences. I think of, you brought up your dad. If your dad passed away and you guys can't be there, or you can't have a funeral for him, and I know that's some things I think Jamie mentioned, that's something you guys have already experienced, friends that had died and you couldn't have a funeral for them. But here's my question. My question is, for people who their day-to-day kind of rhythms are a lot more difficult for us than us. I think I know how you're going to answer this, but I want to pose it. How would you say what you were saying to me? How would you say it to them? What would you say to them?
Yeah, that's a really hard question, because I found myself, especially initially, really grieving for people, grieving for the loss people were feeling. And yeah, we're empty nesters and we have a, comfortable place to live. But my friends who have little kids and they're having to work from home and homeschool. My friends, I have people close to me that have special needs children that are used to being in a very specialized program all day, and now they're at home all day, and it's just so difficult. And yeah, I think what I would say to them is, you can only do what you can do, and that the emphasis needs to be on being present and being connected to people as best you can, and not getting overwhelmed with, you can only do what you can do. And if the kids have to skip the math lesson today, you skip the math lesson, and take advantage of everything the government's offering to help with food and bills. And, I've seen interest-free loans and all kinds of things. But yeah, just taking time for yourself and taking time to be, and recognizing that God doesn't promise us that bad things won't happen. And I know this is very intellectual and it needs to be experiential for people for it to be real. He doesn't promise that bad things won't happen to us, but he promises to be with us. And if we can take the time to be present, even in 5 minutes of just silence. We do this exercise with people, and we're highly influenced by Brad Jersak, of just going to your favorite place and being with Jesus in your favorite place, not just sitting in silence, but use, Isaiah 26:3 says, I will keep the imperfect peace whose mind is fixed on me because she trusts me. And that word mind in the Hebrew is imagination. And so recognizing that your imagination is holy and sanctified in a place where God meets us, and going up into your intuitive mind, in your imagination, and taking that time to be in your favorite place and allowing Jesus to represent himself however he wants for you there. Mm-hmm. And being able to exchange those burdens, having a place, what's burdensome to you that you can give.
Yeah.
And so, no, it's really hard, and again, I'm repeating all my great mentors, but Paul Young also, I love how he talks about grace for the present moment. I call it, way back in the day, I used to call it grace for the place. People always say, how did you take your kids to a war zone like Baghdad? Or back in the 90s, how did you take your 3 little kids overseas before FaceTime and computers and the internet, and you didn't come home for 5 years? And, a grace for the place. Like, you can't imagine doing it because you didn't have the grace to do it. But I'm in that place. And so there is abundant, generous grace for me. And it's learning how to quiet your heart and just really being able to receive. And there's no right or wrong way. You just have to try it. You just have to do it. It's hard. It's hard. This is a hard season.
I love that. I that was what I was kind of aiming for, because your conversation right before that about um, having the time and focusing intentionally on the presence of God and to know the things that you were talking about. So I think of it like this, Jamie, like if I have my my meter, you know, from 0 to 100, right? And my stress or my suffering or my tragedy, say it red lines, it's at 90, okay? Or maybe for me in this moment, because I still have food and electricity and running water, my stress level is at 30. Well, who needs the presence of God? We both do. And he's going to show up to the level that you need him, grace for the moment. So
Right.
to the person who's suffering, it's the same.
Right.
You know, God is God and he will show up. And
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And it is harder and it's harder for us. And so for us on our part, you know, like you were saying, the compassion and the empathy to let people know that we're with them, even though we may not physically be able to do that right this moment, we're with them. Um,
Right. And I think two key things about what you just said. I don't mean to be a little snooty, but I really
okay.
hate that. I hate that phrase "show up."
Sorry,
Like God is some capricious God who shows up when he
he's
feels like.
always there. He doesn't show up.
Yeah, it's remembering that he is with us, and I think it's helpful when it's difficult. Like I know. I think Jamie spoke a little bit. I don't know if people have seen that yet or not, about when we were living in Baghdad, 4 people on our team were killed. It was a whole section of our team and or a subsection. And it was just so difficult. And it's so easy to feel guilty and to say why. Um, and that was a time we were on lockdown because we didn't know if it was planned, intentional, if we were being followed and targeted, or if it was random. And yeah, the why question is a killer. God's ways are higher than our ways. His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. God is the alive and free God. And to be fully alive and free in him, the why question kills that.
Right.
And it's remembering that he's with you, and that question, what, instead of why. God, what do you want me to know about this? And you know, a long time ago, Elizabeth Elliot, I'm sure you know who she is, maybe
Hmm.
some other people don't, but she lived and worked in Ecuador back in the 50s, and all the husbands on her team were murdered by the tribe of Stone Age people that they worked with. And then she stayed with the tribe, for people that don't know the story. And they all came to follow Jesus in the kingdom of God. But she was one of my early distant mentors. I didn't know her personally, but I would consider her a mentor. And she used to always say, when you're in these situations, take a deep breath and just do the next thing. What do I need to do in the next 5 minutes? What do I really need to do in the next 5 minutes that I can do? And just don't think ahead, don't think in the what ifs, but that grace for the place concept. What do you want me to know, God? And what's the next thing I need to do? We always say in the book of Acts, around chapter 2, the things are happening and they don't know what's going on. And one of their questions is, what do we need to know? And then a few verses later, what do we need to do?
Mm.
And that's just such a great model. We tend to do as a coping mechanism. And it's just that being, what do I need to know? What do you want me to know? Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And you
Yeah.
weren't being snooty. I get it. I just have a default. Sometimes I say things from an earlier paradigm.
Oh yeah, I know. I do too. Yeah.
No, but I agree. Because I feel like God is always here, and I'll take it even a step further. I think he's always talking. The problem isn't, you know, God showing up like he hasn't been here, or God, please say something like you're not saying something. It's more, help me hear you, help
Yeah.
me recognize you,
Help me
right?
even just perceive you. A
Yeah.
few years ago, I was doing someone was leading me in spiritual direction. And for a whole summer, she had me ask this question 3 times a day throughout the day at like lunch, dinner, in the morning. Just, God, where were you? Where and how were you showing me your love? And I missed it. Like at lunch, I would stop and take just like 15 minutes and just, God, how were you showing me your love this morning? And I missed it, you know? And then it's not so much emphasis on trying to hear the voice of God, you know?
Yeah.
God demonstrates his love to us in so many different ways, through people, through nature, you know, through gratitude.
For sure.
And it's just focusing on perceiving that. And it was really life-changing for me, especially in the middle of chaotic times, you know.
It's awesome. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you some questions now. And so that everybody knows, Donna doesn't know what these are. This hasn't been scripted. So best you can, just give me a 1-word answer. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Social distancing.
I don't like the term social distancing. I've been using this hashtag on our social media stuff. Spatial distancing, social connecting.
Okay.
Spatial distancing, social connect. I'm connecting with you right now socially, right?
Absolutely.
But we're spatially distant.
Yep. COVID-19.
COVID-19. Reset. Opportunity to examine. Oh, 1 word. Okay. Reset. Big reset.
You may not be a person who gets bored. Maybe you are. I don't know. But if you were to get bored, what would be your go-to activity? Like, oh, I have time to do this.
I guess, I don't really struggle with getting bored, but I guess I downloaded, my brother told me about this crossword puzzle app. And so sometimes I'll do that.
Okay. Crossword puzzles. My wife loves crossword puzzles.
Yeah, I've never gotten into them. Another thing I'm doing is like making phone calls. If I don't have anything to do, I'll try to call people.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That would go back to what you were saying earlier. We're becoming more intentional about trying to connect.
Yes.
Right? Because we can't. Yeah. Favorite thing that you've done since the lockdown started?
Cooking.
Okay. Awesome. That would not be my favorite thing.
A big creative outlet for me that I don't have much time to do.
Oh, that's awesome. I would imagine you're probably reading stuff. Something you're currently reading that you're enjoying.
I'm just finishing up a book called The Choice. It's by a psychiatrist named Dr. Edith Eger, E-G-E-R, and it's fabulous. She's can I say a bit about it or no?
Sure, if you'd like, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just the story. She's 90 years old. She's a Holocaust survivor. And it's her ideas are so similar to all that we've learned just throughout our lives. And as a mental health professional, she has just such a great way of stating it. But just the choice that we have to have the right mindset, to enter into transformation, to respond to things as opposed to just reacting. Anyway, it's a fabulous book, her story and her work.
And it's her story.
The first half is her story growing up and being captured and the whole deal. And then the second half is then choices that led her to America and to the career she has. And then she gives all these case studies of people that she helps.
Okay, so it's called The Choice. And her last name was E-G-E-R or G-G?
E-G-E-R, Dr. Edith Eger.
Eger. Okay, awesome. Okay. I'm going to skip that one. Since cooking has been your go-to activity, what's your favorite snack?
My favorite snack is frozen cherries. I get these organic cherries from Costco, and I'd love to just eat them in a bowl frozen.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I would imagine you've got projects going on. Jamie told me he just put together a book proposal, so he's working on a book. Any current project you're working on?
Yeah, this has been on the back burner for years, not years, but maybe years, is we have a video series that's an introduction to the principles of identity called Knowing Rediscovered. And I've wanted to develop like a listening journal, a listening prayer journal that goes along with it, kind of through taking you through the steps of hearing the voice of the divine and learning to live in love and live in your true, hearing your identity. Anyway, so I'm developing, that's one of a few things I'm developing.
Awesome. That's great. Sounds wonderful. Okay, least favorite thing about spatial distancing?
First thing that comes to my mind is I recently had a birthday, and that was a big bummer. You know, it was a nice, quiet day, and my granddaughter's birthday is coming up, and we have 3 birthdays coming up in our family, and often I would try to go and be, you know, Jamie and I would try to go and be with the kids on their birthdays. And so that's my least favorite thing.
Okay. Last question, and this one you can do more than one word. Not that you haven't already, but this one you
terrible.
No. I was poking. Don't totally poke for fun. I love it. It's hard to do one word. Just maybe a final thought, something that you feel has helped you wisdom-wise, whatever.
Well, I think what I just said, and when I was talking about the book, is realizing that we have a choice of how we think.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to think the worst. We don't have to be anxious, that's really a choice that we're making. And taking the time to respond in love, receiving and giving love, and not reacting in fear or reacting in guilt, but really responding to what's happening from a sound mind and not from fear, from that place like Isaiah 26:3 of perfect peace. I think just you have a choice of how you look at this. We have a choice of how we look at it.
Yeah.
And I think for me, being in this isolated place of I'm not suffering greatly. I'm grieving for people I know who are suffering, and there is that helpless feeling. But what can I do? You know, I've been making bread, and so I'm going to give it away. We don't need to eat, we usually don't eat bread, but I love doing it. And so just what are the little things that I can do to contribute? And if all of us are doing that, wow, it's changing the world. I mean, it's really, you see it all over the good news sites and social media.
Yeah.
And so I think choosing how I want to think about this and really making an intentional practice of choosing what's healthy ways to think about it, knowing that God's with us and that he loves us. What does he want me to know today? Yeah. What does he want me to know today so that I can live in the truest sense of who I am?
That's great. I think so many times people experience the fear because the issue under that is control. And so I didn't choose, and I can't choose, the pandemic. I'm in it, but the choice now will be, how do I respond to it? And depending on, what's happening, the choices that are in front of me are different. Everybody's different. But I think what you were talking about are the things that inform and shape and structure those choices for us. And then, obviously the consequences, and I don't mean that in a negative sense, but in a positive sense, maybe the word fruit, or what will happen as a result in a good sense of the choices that I make.
Yeah, and it really feels like, I know we're wrapping it up here, but it just really feels like the world needed a reset. And that was, I think you asked me that earlier, just COVID. It's a reset. And yeah, I think it's really needed. And I hate that it's suffering, but it's giving birth to something new. And I hope we don't miss it.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Because it'd be very easy to. It'd be very easy to scramble back to get back to what we knew instead
Yeah.
of learning from what's happened.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, well, thank you so much for
My
being with us and sharing some thoughts. And for those of you who are watching, you'll get a chance to meet, hopefully, Donna when we finally have the conference, whenever that may be
Yeah.
here. So anyway, thanks, Donna.